right, it looks like he's going over some text messages, and you can hear the attorney there. He wanted him to go over all of them to make sure they're accurate. While he does that and we don't have silence in that courtroom, let me bring back my panel, Ashley Wilcott and Katie Tarkovsky. Let's talk about this case. So here's a guy that's on trial for murder, David Holbrook. He's out in Florida. They say he killed Melissa Howard, but she had just got out of this court battle about her kids with her ex-husband at the time. And then you have the aspect, Ashley, of the boyfriend who was having an affair on his wife, who happened to come by the crime scene the night, and he was the one that called 911, and he actually then called his wife and said, oh, by the way, I'm having an affair, and she's dead now. So there's a lot going on with this case, Ashley. I think more than one suspect, in my opinion.
Right. And so add to that, I just have to add, and you know this from the evidence, that the wife actually then came over to where this woman had been killed to help. So what a wife that is. Having said all that, I do think this is a case where there's more than one potential suspect in terms of a defense's argument, and they can point the finger in this case. Then there's also been testimony presented that the DNA on the victim's sweatshirt actually had one Y male chromosome, and I think the identification to the defendant was 1 in 39 million. So that's also damning evidence potentially that's an advantage to the prosecution.
Yeah, absolutely. And Katie, not only was there the affair and the wife shows up to the crime scene, I believe in previous testimony, the wife of the boyfriend, Chris Cadenhead, actually called her father to the scene. So you got all of these people showing up to this crime scene. And to me, it kind of sounds like Chris, the boyfriend who was married at the time and having an affair with the victim in this case, may have been trying to set an alibi to say, well, why would I call my wife, who I just told her I'm having this affair, and she brings her dad over, if I had anything to do with it? But I still question, he was supposedly going on this hunting trip, and he just happens to go over there before he goes to this hunting trip where people are waiting for him.
Yeah, that's quite the phone call for the wife to receive, I guess, getting all of that news at the same time. Definitely doesn't look great for the boyfriend, but at the same time, I think that it would be better if the wife had already known about the affair. It would have given him more motive to do that. But, I mean, he is still a potential suspect that the defense can point to, for sure.
Right. Now, Ashley, there was also testimony that I think to Janice Burke, who was an attorney for the victim, that she testified that Melissa said that her husband, her ex-husband, who had just lost custody of the kids, had sent Holbrook over there prior to scare her into letting the son stay with him. So to that end, why is the husband, even though he was at a dinner that night, we all know you don't have to be somewhere to actually conspire to commit murder, why isn't the husband being charged in this?
That's right. That's a really good question, because that's exactly what happened. Is they say that she made a call because the husband did send the defendant over to threaten her. So, you know, the only thing I can maybe assume is that the husband does have an alibi. There were more than one witnesses presented that stated that he was in fact.
Hey, Ashley, I hate to cut you off, but we got to break into live court. Let's go right now. All right, it looks like they have some text messages up. Again, this is Robert Davis, and he is the best friend of the defendant in this case, David Holbrook. And the reason it says Russell is his middle name, but you can see there, it says, hey, Alabama State Police just showed up at my house with a search warrant for saliva and DNA. And you see the response there from Robert. Damn it, man, what did they, and we can't see what the rest of it says, but obviously, David Russell Holbrook was texting his best friend about this DNA sample and this search warrant. House full of people, what a bunch of, you can see what it says there. But, you know, you can question this text message. Was he worried about it, or was he just upset that they were showing up on graduation day, as it says in that text message? You know, that's up for a jury to decide. You can interpret that a few different ways. Ashley, while we have a minute here, let me ask you this about that text message. I mean, could it have been he was just upset that, you know, they showed up on graduation day, or was it that, man, I'm kind of worried that they're showing up?
I think it could be either one, because, you know, I think anybody would naturally be like, what the hell, and emailing their friend and saying, or texting their friend and saying, what's going on? But here's what I think will be telltale. I cannot imagine that's the only text that he sent. I suspect it's probably part of a conversation, which may give us more information about which of those two things he was feeling.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there's more text messages between the two because they were best friends. So, Katie, let me ask this. Like, if I'm involved in a crime, or even if I'm not involved in a crime, I know in 2019, even back then when this happened, that text messages are stored, they're saved. I'm not going to be texting anything that has anything to do with that case because I know when this goes to trial, it's going to come back against me. Do you think this was a silly move on his part? I mean, why couldn't you just say, hey, man, meet me for a beer and let's talk?
If only all of our clients really realize the extent of using text messages. I mean, we all know as attorneys that text messages can be used, deleted text messages can be retrieved, right, and that anything can be used against you, but people do it all the time. So I don't necessarily know that. I guess the defense could argue, you know, nobody would be that stupid to send text messages about something if they really were involved, but realistically speaking, that happens all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure. You know, Ashley, I'd be curious to see if there were any text messages where he actually told Robert Davis, yeah, you know, the ex-husband told me to go over there to scare her, because we heard testimony about this gas can a few days before this murder. He showed up to the house with a gas can. Of course, you know, I don't know if there's any proof of that other than hearsay, but at the same time, I wonder if he was crazy enough to text that, yes, the husband, who had just lost custody, told me, let's go over here and just scare her.
Yeah, and let me just say this. When I hear cases in front of me, it is amazing to me what people will say, do, put in writing, text, put on social media. It's all out there.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't get it. I mean, you know, this is like CSI 101. Like, don't send a text. Don't send an email. You don't even send a smoke signal, because someone may be sitting there with their camera phone to take a picture or a video of the smoke signal. Like, I guess, you know, you can be a criminal, you can think you're smart, but criminals always do stupid things, you know. But again, just that in itself doesn't say that David Holbrook killed Melissa Howard. That will be based on DNA evidence, of course. The prosecution has laid out the theory that he did it, but originally, if you remember, police way back when in 2006 thought it was maybe a professional hitman, because they said they had nothing to tie anyone to anybody. And you can see Melissa there on your screen. She had just received custody of her kid. She was going through a heated custody battle with her and her ex-husband at the time. She had actually installed, I believe, a recorder on her phone to record some of those conversations. And one of her friends actually testified that just days prior, that the defendant in this case, David Holbrook, actually showed up to her house unannounced, and it kind of spooked Melissa and it spooked her friend. A lot going on in this case. Again, we got a boyfriend, we got an ex-husband, we got the defendant. A lot going on in this case. We're going to cover it on the other side of this break. Stay tuned to the Law and Crime Network. We'll be right back. Welcome back to an all-new hour of Law and Crime. We're still on the David Holbrook case out of Florida. Again, he's accused of murdering Melissa Howard back in 2006. Let's get back to live testimony right now. It looks like there's some movement going on in that court. While we do that, let me introduce Anthony Tall to my all-star panel. Joining me in the studio. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So listen, they're showing text messages here between Robert Davis, who was the best friend of this defendant, David Holbrook, and one of the text messages, one of the first ones they showed was, hey man, the cops just showed up with a search warrant for my DNA. As an attorney, does that look good for your client that he actually even sent that text message?
It doesn't look good, but it's not it's not the death knell to the case.
Right.
There's ways that can be explained. In one way, you just look at it, hey, he's just notifying, hey, I'm kind of panicking here.
Right.
The cops are here. What is this about?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first approach you would take to it. But it's obviously not good that he's saying that the cops just showed up and they want DNA.
Yeah, it's not good. And let me bring the rest of my panel on, Ashley and Katie as well. So, one of the biggest things that I have a problem with this entire case, Ashley, is we have Christopher Cadenhead, who was the boyfriend who's having this affair, and the defense actually challenged his timeline. He said, listen, I went home around 8:30. I got packed for this hunting trip. I left the house around 9:15. My only witness is my wife, who found out I was having an affair that night after I called 911 on one phone, called her on the other phone, and yeah, by the way, my wife shows up. So how did investigators, now I'm an investigator, you know that, how did investigators clear this guy just based on that alone?
Well, that's something the defense, I hope, has looked into, and maybe reasons why they want to point the finger at him. Because as you well know, and you're the expert in investigations, but Vince, they need to have looked at every step of what he was doing at the time, beforehand, after the fact, to ensure his alibi was airtight, but also that he didn't conspire or wasn't involved in this horrific murder.
Right. Now, Katie, here's another bone to throw out there. Let's say that the wife knew about this affair. She testified that she didn't. And let's just say she was involved in it. And maybe that's why he called her to the scene. Because, listen, I've been married twice. Not something I'm proud of. There won't be a third. But I think if I was having an affair and I show up to my girlfriend's house and she's dead, the last person in this world I'm going to call would be my wife, unless she already knew about this affair.
Yeah, I think that is definitely understandable. This could be a good cover-up job on his part. Of course, he's going to say that she didn't know about it and that he told her at the same time that he discovered the body. That's to his best advantage. So if there's any way for the defense to catch them in a lie or to get information that the wife knew about the affair beforehand, that this looks a lot more sketchy than what was originally presented, that's going to be great evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, I think there's some video surveillance they're showing in court right now. Let's take a look at that. I believe this was at a Walmart. I believe that's a Walmart because I can see the smiley face there. I'm not sure if that's Melissa in the top right or not, but we definitely see two individuals. Can't really tell what they're doing. They're over by something there, but I guess you can argue and say that they're being suspicious in this video footage. And of course, they're walking out of frame there. So I'm sure that there's a reason that the prosecution is showing this video here. Looks like they paid for their items, whatever they were. It's kind of hard to see here on this video. All right, Anthony, so let me get back to this boyfriend angle here. Now, I get that the defendant in this case was the best friend of the victim's ex-husband. But, if one of my friends came to me and said, hey, I need you to knock off my ex-wife because she just got custody of my son. I'm calling the cops.
Right.
I love you, man, but what's that commercial? You're not getting my Bud Light. I love you, man, but I'm not killing your ex-wife. Right. So why would this guy even do that? Why would he agree to this if it's true?
Well, if it's true, I think there's a couple of things that you kind of got to kind of look at. The first thing you want to question is whether or not the emotional part of the relationship that he had with this friend. Maybe this is a friend who's just he's not serious about this. He can't be serious about this. Maybe he's just taking it in jest. And then the second thing, he's just probably emotional, agreeing to it, maybe trying to calm him down. That's how I would argue it. It's a tough one, though. Generally, that's solicitation to murder for murder, so it's a crime.
Absolutely.
So you kind of, I guess, obligated to report that. Mm-hmm. So and certainly his friend implicating himself by not doing that, not reporting it, is a factor, a risk factor. But
right. So there is that factor of solicitation because according to other testimony, the ex-husband had sent him over there to scare her, essentially. So to that point, you as an attorney, wouldn't you charge the husband in some capacity of this? Oh yeah, he was at dinner with his girlfriend or wife, whoever she was, and her kids, but if he's sending his friend over there to do a scare tactic, don't you think he should be charged?
I do. If he's sending his friend over there to do a scare tactic, and if you have certain statements that he's made, or that you can get into evidence, I think it would be more than feasible to have him charged with solicitation, conspiracy, or something. You know?
Absolutely. I would say so. Do we have movement back in the courtroom? All right, so that was Robert Davis. Again, he's the best friend of David Holbrook, and we were going over some text messages, and I understand the video surveillance we were watching was actually Holbrook and his brother inside that Walmart on the night in question, on the night Melissa Howard was killed. Anthony, let me ask this. We see the video. Now, his story is he was at a party. He left to go get some medicine. Then he went back to the party. We see him there on the video. Now, the prosecutor said, hey, that video was time-stamped an hour after he said he went. But could you argue, depending on what time of the year it was, or even if it's not daylight savings time, could you argue that maybe Walmart didn't have the right timestamp on their video? Because I've seen surveillance footage, seriously, that has not had the right timestamp.
Right. You could argue that. That's a tough trough, though. I think one of the things that you probably want to argue is if you're going to go down that route, is you want to argue the where's the camera at? Who sets up the timing? How often is it checked? Is there any is there any way that it could be delayed or fast forwarded? Or is there any way that it could be of another day? When you're trying to argue something that narrow and that tight in a case like this, and you don't want it to come off as ludicrous to the jury or the judge. So you got to make it make sense.
Excellent point, sir. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll get back to Florida. And again, we're covering Dave Dooley in Kentucky as well. So much going on here on the Law and Crime Network. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.